Eh, one sec. Ah, God. She just hate it. The cowlick won't go away. Hello, folks. Hi. It's me again, and I'm back with books that have changed the way I see the world, and it in a very long overdue review. Today, I want to talk to you about Kiss of the Fur Queen by Thompson Highway. And Thompson Highway, as some of you may know, others may not, he is an Indigenous Cree Canadian, and he is noted for being both a playwright, a novelist, and very much an educator, and a man who has just drawn so much attention through activism and advocacy to Indigenous people, Indigenous rights, Indigenous culture all across Canada for decades. And I first learned of him back in university in my first year of taking Canadian studies. His play, The Res Sisters, which is really magnificent. In fact, this book has very much the same sort of things going for it. It was yes, it was on our syllabus, and I read it and found it very powerful. During our second year, I asked for this book for Christmas because I'd heard that it was coming out, and this was Thompson Highway's first novel, and he's done a few since then. But he's very he's multi-talented, multi-focused, multimedia. You know. Point was, this I wanted to read as a follow-up. I also wanted to read the other play he's known for. Actually, the other play that's sort of that he's generally known for. In any case, this other play I'm referring to, for which he was really well known and won several awards, I believe, was Dry Lips on a Move to Campus Casing. And whereas the Red Sisters focused on a group of ladies on a reservation in southern Ontario, I believe, Dry Lips that focused on a group of men. And in both cases, there was like a game at the center of it there. The sort of the sort of the inciting thing. And for the women, it was this big bingo, and for the men, it was hockey. And Kiss of the Fur Queen. This is essentially Thompson Highway's autobiography. At one time reading it, I thought that it has two chief characters in it, and they are Champion Jeremiah and Gabriel Unumitu, or Unumitu Gabriel, because, yes, they had the names that their parents assigned them, plus their Christian names, which, of course, were assigned by the local priests. And in any case, I thought he was dividing himself, into these two characters, because I could see an awful lot of what I'd heard about him, what I'd read about him, represented in both. But as it turns out, no, these two characters did represent him and his brother very, very eloquently and accurately. And as I'm sure I've said before, I've been building up to reviewing this because it is hard to deal with. Because, like a lot of things I learned in Canadian studies, a lot of things I've learned subsequently, there is some really harsh truth to this country, to being Canadian. But another thing I learned in Canadian studies, and it was part of I read this book and another, The Danger Tree, by Todd McFarlane, I think. A writer with proud Newfoundlander roots. And that book, it was about his own family history, but it was also getting into World War I, hence the reference to The Danger Tree of Beaumont Hamel. If you're not familiar, please look it up. I will be here for an hour explaining that one, because that too is very powerful. But his quote stuck with me. He said, "The first duty of any patriot to their country is to know the truth about it." So he was referring to, yes, both his family history, but of course the history of his country. And for his family at one time, that was Newfoundland, and then it expanded to become Canada. Any case, to get into Kiss of the Fur Queen, this book starts, and this has many beautiful, richly symbolic, magical, dreamlike sort of digressions or whatnot. And it begins with one such thing. and it's Champion and Unamito's father, who is a dog sled professional, extremely talented. He's driving huskies. He's pulling through the snow, and this is something that the family was known for, and they're very proud of it. And his father became a champion, and so he named his first son Champion. And this is something you see. I've seen this many times. This idea of wishing victory upon your children, that they will be winners and so forth. And this is a theme that comes up in a lot of very, very good Indigenous film, movies, plays, and novels, because the issue of being colonized and sort of the mark that leaves on people, right? The idea of being a winner and overcoming and all that stuff there, it goes very, very deep. And, which brings me to another, wonderful thing that you must see. It's a film, and it is Smoke Signals. And it's one of several that feature a lot of Canadian talent as well as American talent as well. And beautiful, powerful, and it just all comes up. And in that film, the main character, played by Adam Beach, is a Canadian Indigenous actor. Um, he's named Victor, and that story, that was his name was kind of a very intrinsic element in the whole plot. Any case, so we see Champion Jeremiah. He is raised in this is Saskatchewan, I believe, northern Saskatchewan, northern Prairie provinces, and he is northern Cree, and he's his upbringing, right? He learns his culture, he learns his language, he is happy and proud of where he's from. And then he is sent off to boarding school, as is the typical case. We see very early on that priests have a lot of authority, a lot of sway in the communities there, and his little brother, Unamitu Gabriel, follows a few years later. And the two of them, as they're going through all this, they start on somewhat divergent paths. Whereas Jeremiah, and this is key, over time, their Cree names, their assigned Cree names, they are used less and less, to the point where they're using their Christian names all the time, because this is what is being beaten into them at residential school. And yes, and of course the story is about sort of the coming full circle of that, of healing and of finding your way back, right, from all the abuse and alienation. So while they're at school, Champion Jeremiah decides he wants to take up the piano, and the priest seems very interested in this. Seems to like where he's coming from, and he shares some musical influence, some Cree musical influence, and I remember they wrote it out. It was Weeks Chillawu or something. It's like a cry of happiness and so forth. And the priest was really like entranced with that, and the way it's being conveyed there, it does sound sexual. And yes, and Gabriel too. He hates residential school, and when they're coming home, Jeremiah is sort of less enthused, but Gabriel is more enthused. He likes to get away from there because something bad is going on there. And over time, Champion Jeremiah moves to the big city. He continues to study music. He loves the piano, and in fact, this parallels Thompson Highway's life. This is what he did. He went off after residential school. He went off to study music. He attended countless concerts, and he was in England at one point, and he would go to the concert hall and just immerse himself in all this Western music and culture. And in any case, his brother followed into the city, where he was studying dance. And very soon, it became clear between the two of them, it's like, we're sitting on some seriously powerful demons. Champion Jeremiah began working with a I think, a friendship center or an outreach center, trying to help Indigenous people living on the streets. And this is just a guess there, but I'm thinking they're in Saskatchewan or possibly Toronto. It's basically the big city. And Gabriel, we also learn, is gay. He has, and and he is also acting out his trauma. And this trauma has to do with the fact that, yeah, while at residential school, he was raped routinely by a priest. And this is shared in some unpleasant language. And yet, as things are going on, though, you can see he's reliving the experience, right? He has sex with men, although he is gay, right? There's no question of that. But he is having damaging, dangerous relations, and in spite of the fact that he's exceptional dancer and very beautiful, what he does, he feels this way. It's like, yes, look at me, I'm handsome, I'm skilled, I'm an absolute conductor of magic when I'm at dance, but inside I feel sick and diseased because reflecting Highway's real life experience, his brother did contract HIV. And so while dealing with this revelations and this tragedy, the brothers have a terrible fight at one point, like they're physically fighting each other. And as Highway did in the Res Sisters, there's this omnipresent sort of sense of, the others are watching, the ancestors, or Nanabush, the raven in Cree culture, or other such, spiritual beings are watching and they are crying. And other times they're sort of, playing their tricks and doing their thing. But in the context of the story, the supernatural elements, they are there in the form of like the dream time and so forth. And, when they get into a fight, this is one of them. It's like things sort of fade to black and we see the representation of the raven or some spirit on the wall crying. And yes, other ones include Jeremiah had a terrible dream at one point there, and this too really goes to the heart of a lot of what Highway was saying, because I remember you mentioned this. He refers to missing and murdered Indigenous women, as well as Indigenous women who were violently assaulted sexually. And one of his dreams is he's seeing the city. He's seeing the parking lot where they picked up a woman who was quite inebriated and threw up and had to be hauled off and helped home. And now in his dream, he's seeing a baby falling out of her or another Indigenous woman into that parking lot on a bed of broken glass and sharpened screwdrivers. And that imagery, I will not explain all that, but it is a reference to sexual and physical abuse. And so, throughout the story there, Jeremiah also realizes that he too was sexually abused, but he's been repressing that. Gabriel went on to hate priests and hate the religion, even though, he did mess around with some priests after, or at least one in the stories I recall, after residential school. At this point, Jeremiah, who had been a pretty observant Christian up until this point, though, he decides that's it for me. And this does very much, it's very much in keeping with Thompson Highway's own experience. After spending all those years immersing himself in Western music and Western culture, he came home. And he came to realize that, he'd been chasing this, hard to say, like a false dream or just a bad dream. It was poorly motivated. He seemed to be on track to become a classical concert pianist, but he said, no, thank you. He decided instead to work in Indigenous communities, to do outreach and advocacy and, work through friendship centers and mentorship and to do all that to promote healing and cultural revitalization, all that stuff. And then after years of that, he began putting this all down on paper, talking about all the types of experiences that he had, that he'd witnessed, and telling the stories that he saw so much of. And as my Professor Rankin was her name, uh, don't rightly remember her first name, damn it. She said that, yeah, Thompson Highway came in once to address the students in the class, and I thought, oh my God, how cool is that? I really wish that it happened there. And rather than, showing up all fancily dressed and hoity-toity and pretentious like, he was in blue jeans and his regular clothes, came in and was plain spoken and said that one of the things that he wanted to do with the Res Sisters in particular was to make the Res cool, show what kind of funky, fun people Canada's Indigenous people are, and sort of kidding, not kidding, talked about whom he blamed for just life being difficult for so many, and I wish I'd seen that. In any case, yes, this. I don't want to give. I've given much away there, but suffice it to say, this book does end in much the same way that his plays do. It's like everything comes full circle, but it doesn't have like this huge sense of, everything's resolved, everything's better now, happily ever after kind of stuff. That's a very, very kind of Western motif of literature, right? And his stories, it follows a much more Indigenous storytelling trend, or not to be generalistic here, but a Cree storytelling trend, in that the narratives are circular, right? Things come back around, and lessons are learned, sure, the experiences are had, not everybody makes it. And so, yeah, from all that, though, it is like, yeah, greater wisdom, greater appreciation is attained, and I did, in spite of the fact that it was really quite sad, I did enjoy the ending. And it pained me to know that, in fact, Thompson Highway had a brother who was openly gay, who did die of HIV. So it's like, this was not like literary license and so forth there, because somewhere along the way I'd learned that Thompson Highway is gay. And yeah, he too, he lives with his life partner, and they are still very much together, very happy and in love. And so yeah, having sort of learned that about him, I thought, oh, that's what Gabriel represented, that other side of him, right? Side that was clear on and open about his sexuality, did not like Christianity, and he did intimate in an interview I once saw him in that, yes, the things he wanted to express and the experiences he had, some were just absolutely so horrible. And he didn't outright say it, but it's like, yeah, when you spoke of abuse at residential school, this was one of the things he was looking to, get out of himself there to sort of share. And so it was no longer, a burden to him. Whew. So, bottom line, I cannot recommend this book enough. It is not only genius, it's not only got this incredibly powerful symbolism and it's hard for me to think of another word here for it, but yeah, the rather spiritual, dreamlike digressions in the story, those two, they're very effective, and they really tell the story. And if you have read any of his plays, or you're familiar with what some of the symbolism means, which you do pick up from reading some of his plays, then yeah, it is. It's very clear, and you see a consistent message, right? And he also explores many other aspects there, such as like when Gabriel came home and was basically telling his father, yeah, I don't want to, why would I be happy about going back to school? And sort of conveying that he hates it there. But his father is saying, son, they saved us, referring to the priests, and missionaries and so forth. Like he'll joke about how the Europeans came over to bother us and so forth, employing just sort of gentle humor about colonialism. But his father and his mother in this story they're representative of those people who accepted the religion into their lives, and countless people from the Arctic Circle down to the southern tip of Chile. Indigenous people, they did adopt Christianity, right? And much like all colonial countries there who were colonized by one empire or another, they did adopt a religion that was brought in, but they used it to the, their own empowerment, their own effect. But there were still many, many ways in which it influenced, it exerted power over them in a way that was terrible. And yeah, residential school being an unadulterated, nightmarish example. And given, everything that's happened in Canada now in the past, let's say, decade and a half, and it's Winnipeg. I just opened to a random page and said Winnipeg. Yeah, so Winnipeg would be the big city, and northern Manitoba would be, yes, which makes a lot of sense because, of course, the northern Manitoba Cree are well known, and yes, Winnipeg is known as being a relatively rough city, especially if you are poor and Indigenous. And so, yeah, this really speaks to what we have seen here in Canada within the past decade and a half when it came to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, when it came to just the reactions to it. And for example, how a lot of people who worked in the system, they're like, oh, it's unfair to paint us all with the same brush. And I'll tell you a really good story about that in just one second. Just something I read in the paper at the time. And how mass graves are being found outside of these old residential schools. And also, of course, yeah, there's still so many files and documents that the government hasn't released on what went on in residential schools, which confirm, apparently, they confirm the deaths and the death toll and the measures that were taken to hide that, especially from the families and from the public in general. And it disgusts me. It should disgust everyone. Anyway, to circle back to what the one priest, and this was in a Comox newspaper there where I lived at the time. But yeah, these stories were coming in from all over Canada, and a lot of them were just bitch, bitch, bitch. Oh, I'm being so badly perceived because I worked at a residential school. We weren't all bad. It's like you were part of a horrible system, and this was happening. So, your feelings, you were part of this, and you should be speaking out, and not griping about yourself. But this one priest, he wrote in, and he told a story that just absolutely smacked of sincerity. He said, I was, as soon as I did join the holy orders and whatever, I got sent to a remote school. It was out in an island, remote community up north a ways, and I was scared. I didn't know what to do, but the other teachers there and the kids themselves. He was a principal at this place, a newbie, a complete neophyte. And he said, yeah, everyone there, the community, the kids, the other teachers, they helped me. They helped acclimate, and I felt that, the time I was there, all that we had a positive experience. But he learned the truth about just how horrible these schools were for so many children and the kind of practices that went on there. Child labor and, yeah, mass graves and all this stuff, and he did not deny it. He did not sit in any denial. He did not try to say, oh, these schools did some good things too, like I forget her name, but that idiot wannabe politician. yeah, he said that I realized, and this was one of the smartest things I ever heard. I realized that this was not a good system with a few bad apples. This was a bad system, a horrible, horrific system with a few good apples. And of course, he's saying he was one of the good ones, but not in a way that was any at all braggadocious. So I thought that was incredibly brilliant, and the fact that the issue has only become more intensified in recent years. I think Thompson Highway, he should be read, he should be consulted because he is giving an insider's perspective, not just on residential schools, but the damage it did to one generation after the next, because that damage was just passed on, right? The abuse, the neglect, the pain, the torture, all of that, and the sense of alienation. And we know how, yeah, abuse works in cycles, and whether or not it's the kind of abuse that's directed inwardly, like drugs, alcohol, self-harm, or the kind that's directed outward, physical, sexual. Kids who experience that are more likely to do it to others as they get older. As I said, this is going to be very difficult here, and I've just been free form thinking and stream of conscious. Sorry here. I've just been doing this stream of conscious style, and yeah, it has been, as expected, very, very, very difficult. But I thank you so much for listening to it, and I strongly urge you to read the works of Thompson Highway, people out there. And again, can't believe it took me this long to actually get into this. Now that I did, of thinking I should add anything else I've read by him to this series. Now, so far, that's only been the Rez Sisters. Everything else has been, about him and about his writing. So, I plan to expand on that soon myself. And yes, it will be difficult to read these things. These are not easy stories to get through, and this is something the Highway is so known for, and it does seem to speak to a certain, a culture that, whether it predated contact or sort of evolved from it, a culture in which people are able to address suffering, terrible, terrible events, but at the same time approach life, and speak with jovial intentions and humor. And Thompson Highway, he epitomizes that. From what I've seen from other examples, does seem to be a very, very a very indigenous sort of method of like storytelling and healing and conveying lessons. You have like this horrible experiences and horrible realities being conveyed, but at the same time, there's just this humor and lightheartedness and all that stuff. And it's like these two things coexisting, and it's like on the one hand, you wouldn't think it makes sense. On the other hand, it makes perfect sense, right? It's like, it's what we need. We need to laugh. We need to cry. We need to do all that stuff in order to heal. And Thompson Highway is famous for that. They say that he's a man who is a master at combining tragedy and just pee your pants laughter and humor. Yeah, and then there are examples of that in here too, and there certainly were in the Rez Sisters. I know that for a fact. But yeah, it's brilliant, and I don't know. I cannot speak to whether or not that is a cultural thing or if that is something that is him, but I do know that I've seen multiple examples of it. So wherever it comes from, this guy really gets it. And yeah, one more time I'll say, so I consider everything he has to say in any of his works here to be incredibly relevant to Canada, to truth and reconciliation, to our history, to, yeah. a very particular, specific type of experience that is goes right to the heart of everything that was wrong with this country for so very long and is still today. Right now, we're on the cusp of do we address this in full, or do we just keep making the same old promises and oh, that was bad, we're sorry, and yeah, we're going to look into this. Justice will be served. It will be redressed. Yeah, but as my wife likes reminding me, um, not that I need to be, but she has reminded me. In British Columbia, the last residential school closed in the mid 1970s, but in Canada, it closed in the 90s. These bastions of repression, brutality, kill the Indian to save the child, basic philosophy. It endured till the 1990s. Unbelievable. And yeah. And Canada was the last of three nations, including the United States and Australia, to issue an apology for residential schooling. And yeah, justice still hasn't been served, right? The full extent of the damage and loss has still not been revealed. And yeah, so many documents still need to be released. In any case, this book is a really very beautiful and in many ways magical read. You know, the fact that it's so educational, that's just another huge bonus. So yeah, as I said before, even though it's difficult, you really should read it because it just is that relevant. And as much as we like to not enjoy hearing about how bad things are for many people and how bad they continue to be in spite of our, unawareness of it. Yeah, yet another thing that's extremely relevant today. It addresses privilege. You didn't know about this, so you didn't think it existed. Then you hear about it, oh, you don't want to hear about it. You want to pretend it's over, right? Well, it's a luxury you have because you're not living with it. And sure as shit is not over. The legacy of it is still there, and the actual crimes that were perpetrated are still happening. So inform yourself, get on it, be part of the change. That kind of stuff you would rather see happening in this country, well, make it happen. Okay. All right. Thank you for watching. For those of you who watched this and stayed to the end, thank you for getting through this with me, because that was, I was dreading that, and I was putting it off. And yeah, I hope to be addressing similar topics and related literature in the future. In fact, I have dug up my the Regeneration series, and here is one book in that series, The Eye in the Door. It's by Pat Barker. It's about World War One, and it is about soldiers, and it too is brilliant because it mixes actual history. Like there's a fictional treatment of real historical characters in these stories, along with fictional people and elements that are there to sort of you know to keep the story rolling. And yeah, it's not like these historical figures are backdrops or whatever. They are deeply involved in the story. Wasn't until the second book that I realized that who the main character was, and that he was in fact fictional. Yeah. So I hope to get into that too, but also, of course, to get back into science fiction, William Gibson, and others whose a series of books that I started, but then kind of just with the first book, but then moved on. And that includes Dune. Children of Dune is coming. And, well, several more Gibsons, and I think maybe a few Stevensons. Hard to say. Gonna have to check the stack. Okay? Anyway, thank you for listening. Take care. Talk to you again soon.